It seems we've been measured almost all of our lives. When we were infants with our height and our weight, and as we grew, it became our speed and our strength. And even in school with our test scores, and today with our salaries and job performance. It seems as if those personal averages are almost always used to measure where we are in comparison to our peers. And I think we should look at that a little differently. That personal average is just that. It's something very personal. It's for you. And I think if you focus on that and work to build that, you can really start to accomplish some really amazing things. This idea started for me on a December evening in 2011. I just stepped outside to do our evening chores to feed our horses. I hopped into our tractor, and a few minutes later, a 5-foot-tall, 700-pound bale of hay fell from the loader, crushing me in the seat of the tractor, in the process shattering my T5 and T6 vertebrae. I didn't lose consciousness, but I felt this buzz throughout my body, and I knew it had happened right away. My hands were reaching for my legs, but my legs didn't recognize anything touching them. And in fact, I couldn't feel anything from the center of my chest down. So there I was, about 100 feet from the house, with my arms wrapped around the steering wheel, trying to hold myself up, waiting for help. Well, 45 minutes later, my wife came home, and I heard her step out of the house and like normal, if I needed help, "Hey, do you need help?" And I said, "Yes." And there was a brief pause, and then I heard her yell, "Do you need 911 help?" And again, I yelled, "Yes." Now, the injury wasn't very dramatic or graphic. I simply broke a bone or two. And in the process, I was told I'd probably never walk again. It became very normal for me to use a rope to sit up in bed because my abdominal muscles no longer work, or to use a board to slide out of bed into a wheelchair, or to even wait for people to reach things for me. Everything that I had learned and had known about my height and my strength and my balance and my mobility was blown away. My entire personal average had been reset. And I found myself comparing what I thought I was going to be able to do going forward with what I once was able to do. And I became pretty frustrated. And I soon realized that I almost had to forget about the person I was before and the things I was able to do before. I almost had to pretend it was never me. And I'm afraid if I had not made that realization, my frustration would have turned into something much harder to recover from. And that proved to be a very important lesson for me. You know, it was one thing that I couldn't compare myself to myself, but even around people in the same situation in that hospital, I found that I couldn't try to keep pace or set pace with them as well. And I was left with really only one choice, and that was to focus on who I was at that point in time, with where I needed to go and to get back to who I needed to be. For the next 6 weeks, for 7 to 8 hours a day, that's what I did. I built little by little. And as you might expect, when you're recovering from a spinal cord injury, you're going to have a bad day. You might have a few in a row. And what I found out is that good and bad really didn't have a lot of meaning unless I had the context of knowing what my average was. It was really up to me to decide if something was bad or good based on where I was at that point in time. And it was in my control to determine if it really was a bad day. In fact, it was my decision on whether or not I could stop a streak of bad days. And what I found during that time away from home is I never had a bad day, even with everything going on. There were parts of my day that were certainly not as pleasant as they could be, but it was never an entirely bad day. So I'm guessing all of you have been through a meeting that probably didn't go very well, or a commute that wasn't as great as you would like it, or even burned dinner at night. Did those things really ruin your entire day? What I found in those scenarios is the quicker you move on to what's next, the quicker you can start attacking things. And by moving on to next as fast as possible, you shrink the time you spend in those bad scenarios, and it gives more time for the good. And as a result, the good outweighs the bad, your average increases, and that's just how the math works. It didn't matter to me if I'd spent the morning really struggling with my medication, or at lunch, my legs being very spastic, or even if I had fallen out of my wheelchair They were just small parts of my day and small parts of my average. And so in the months and years that followed, I continued to try to attack things in that way. And before I knew it, I was being presented with some pretty incredible challenges, like completing a marathon in a wheelchair. In early 2016, I met my physical therapist, and after a few really grueling sessions, she must have sensed something, because she pulled me aside and said, you should do a half marathon in your wheelchair. Oh, no, yeah, it's in 10 weeks. And I thought in my mind, you're crazy. I didn't have a workout plan. I didn't have any way of knowing how fast I needed to go or how far I was supposed to go. But I simply got to work. And I started tracking every workout every day, and I simply wanted to be as good as or as fast as I was the prior day. And in the end, I really created that average for myself, and I tried to build on that as much as I could. Well, I finished that race right in time with what my average should have been. And somewhere along the way, I kind of closed the door on who I once was. That person who I was before and all those things I thought I was able to do, it really didn't matter. In fact, walking again really didn't matter. It became much less of a goal for me in terms of where I was going to go. And so this is me. This is my average. Keep in mind, this isn't really just about racing, right? I'm working really hard every day to be better in so many other ways, a better parent, better husband, better coach, teammate, friend, person. And I promise you, even though what you see here is very visible in terms of the challenges that I face, everybody here has something that they're fighting, and it may be visible, it may not be. But please take some time and focus on you instead of others. And I bet you can win those challenges and really start accomplishing so many great things.